Joining us now from London is the host of the Spectator Australia's Fire at Will podcast, Will Kingston. Will, great to see you again. As an Aussie, I have to get your thoughts on this. UFC boss Dana White has unleashed on the Australian media, and it comes a day after the Sydney Morning Herald editor Bevan Shields wrote a piece calling Dana White an enabler of hate. He labelled one of the most popular sports in the world gross, and he claimed that people in New South Wales just wouldn't support the state government's partnership with the UFC, even though it puts Sydney on the world stage and brings in millions of dollars through tourism. Well, Dana White has hit out at Sydney Morning Herald journalist Bevan Shields, and he didn't hold back on his thoughts on Australia's media. Take a listen.
Listen, for a place that is so tough and the people, everything on land and the water can kill you. You have the biggest I've ever seen in the media in my life. I saw a story where a guy was like, I saw Dana do a podcast with the premier and it physically made me sick. Holy you guys have to have the biggest of all time in the media here. I thought we had weak media. You guys win hands down.
Will, unfortunately for us, I think Dana's right. What do you think?
Well, Dana, please don't lump Sky News in with the Sydney Morning Herald. I think they are very, very different beasts. But the interesting thing there, and I think this doesn't just apply to the media, it applies to the perceptions that Americans and the rest of the world have of Australia, in that they come to this country now and they still expect to have that old view of Australia, rugged individualists, anti-authoritarian, irreverent, think Paul Hogan type of thing. Mm. And you get to Australia today, and so often what you are presented with is the exact opposite of that now. Woke ideology has very much infiltrated our media along with all of our other institutions. I think we are now slower to get that pushback against wokeism compared to what we're seeing in the US. And I think you get people like Dana White who actually are genuinely surprised at what they see in Australia. And I think this is a wake-up call. We need to actually say, how do we actually get back to that old view of Australia, which we can all in our minds think about, and push against what I think we all agree, particularly since COVID, is a very, very different and I think quite a troubling national identity that unfortunately we have reformulated for ourselves?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Australia was on the world stage for all the wrong reasons during COVID. I think people right around the world were looking at places like Sydney and Melbourne and looking at the way we had these unbelievable long lockdowns and essentially no freedom of speech and a media that was very one-sided and was censoring all sorts of things. But speaking about the media, let's turn our attention to what's happening in the US, and the unedited footage from the CBS interview with Kamala Harris has been revealed, and it is so embarrassing for CBS and for Kamala Harris, as the answers were clearly edited to make it sound like Kamala Harris was capable of stringing a sentence together, which was certainly not the case. Here's what went to air, and here's the edited version.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Well, this isn't the only clip that surfaced, which is causing concern.
You're talking about how you're going to pay for it. So how are you going to convince a divided Congress that what you say, your plans, are something that they should all agree to and provide to the American people when they've shown no inclination to do that up to this point?
Is that what you needed?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. 30 seconds of silence, please, for room time. Cameras are off.
How will you?
It's going to be taxes. It's going to be literally, if the economists.
And you can hear in her answer there, she was suggesting raising taxes, yet that didn't make the final cut. Now, Donald Trump has amended his lawsuit against CBS, doubling the amount that he claims he's owed for deceptive editing of a Kamala Harris interview from $10 billion to $20 billion. Look, I keep saying this, but no wonder people don't watch the mainstream media anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's two things here. There's the lawsuit, and then there's the matter of journalistic integrity. Any self-respecting journalist who watches that will know that that is a complete ethical breach. I understand that sometimes with an interview, you need to cut it down to fit into a particular time slot, but you need to maintain the same core message and the same tone from the interviewee. So you may cut out a complete question, for example. What they've done there is they've changed how she comes across. They've made her sound more confident. They've made her sound more precise. And the only test that you really need to have in your mind is, would they have given Donald Trump the same luxury? And the answer is, of course they wouldn't, which leads you to believe there is a very clear ideological agenda. And Gab, you're exactly right. Like, as a result of that, when people see this, they go, well, why should we trust this rubbish? Now, on the lawsuit itself, I actually don't think Donald Trump needs to be getting involved in this sort of stuff. For starters, everything I've been told is it's very unlikely he's going to win. The First Amendment in the US is particularly strong, and it generally precludes these types of lawsuits. CBS is digging its own grave. Their ratings are tanking. People will see this and they'll just lose more and more trust. He doesn't need to get involved in these skirmishes. I think he just needs to let nature take its course and let this channel deservedly die a natural death.
Yeah, and the damage has been done. You know, those clips are just going viral in places like X, on YouTube platforms, digital platforms, where more and more people are getting their media. Look, Will, you're probably feeling a sense of relief at the moment over in London, knowing that Harry and Meghan won't be moving back anytime soon. Donald Trump has ruled out deporting Prince Harry. There were, of course, calls for Harry to be deported if it turned out that he lied on his USA visa application about his past drug use. But Donald Trump, well, he obviously has a bit more on his plate than dealing with Prince Harry, and he's told the New York Post that he isn't interested in throwing Harry out of the country. He said, I'll leave him alone. He's got enough problems with his wife. She's terrible. Gosh, Donald Trump is funny. He never misses. What's the reaction been to all this in London?
Well, you just mentioned that Donald Trump is funny, and I think we all know that he's funny, but I think what sometimes we don't appreciate is how effective a political weapon that is. It does so much to sometimes mask some of the things that he says, which other people wouldn't get away with. But in this instance, this could have been a small but annoying political issue because, for example, if he said very somberly, well, Prince Harry is still a representative of the monarchy, one of our great allies is the United Kingdom. I don't think it is proper to deport him. Some of MAGA may have actually got a bit annoyed with that. And they would have said something like, well, he needs to follow the rules like everything else. Donald Trump negated that with an issue in 2 seconds by having a cracking little joke about Meghan, which we all agree with. And at the same time, he just kind of took it off his plate. So it's an interesting, it's a small story, but it's an interesting little insight into how he manages to use humor as a way as a political weapon, as opposed to just being a comedian.
I think a few more politicians here in Australia and right around the world could learn something from Donald Trump, maybe bring some humour into it. I don't know if they've got the personality like Trump.
You need to have a bit of charisma to go along with it. And I'm not sure someone like Anthony Albanese exactly has charisma in spades.
Oh, has he made anyone laugh in an interview? I'm not sure about that. Look, let's talk
Not intentionally.
Let's talk about Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. It's hit a huge milestone. The party's membership has passed 200,000. So, of course, Nigel Farage has taken to social media to hail Reform's success as an incredible achievement. But he also insists that there are no circumstances, in which Reform would ever do a pact with Boris Johnson or the Conservative Party. Look, a lot can change between now and the election, but do you really buy this? Can Reform get big enough on its own to win?
Yeah, it can. I didn't think so 6 months ago. Now I absolutely do. And I also thought 6 months ago that they probably would end up merging with the Tories in some capacity. They are now convinced that they can win this in their own right. And if you look at the trend line, they can. The other thing about that statement that they put out, it is unequivocal. They've said basically the last thing we would ever consider, cross my heart and hope to die, is getting at some sort of a relationship with the Tories. If they were to renege on that, it would completely breach any sort of trust that they have with their base. So I think we can now rule that out and end that conversation. I just don't think it's going to happen. The thing is, we're now in uncharted territory for a long period of time in the United Kingdom, where it is a three-party race. So the old rules of, having to try and just beat the other party no longer apply. And it also means you don't need to have as big a share of a vote to actually end up winning the whole thing. In Australia, with the coalition Labor duopoly, you really need to have a vote share in the, high 30s or 40s. The Reform Party could end up winning this election with a 25 to 30% vote share. And so it's a very different way of thinking about it. They are tapping into a seething anger in the United Kingdom at the moment. Question is, can they keep that momentum up over 4 years? Again, I say to everyone, 4 years is a heck of a long time. So time will tell. But the current trend line for reform is astonishing. And they have quite literally a once in a century opportunity to revolutionise British politics.